The first Thanksgiving without David was a hollowed-out thing. The scent of roasting turkey and sage stuffing, smells that had meant home and comfort for 40 years, now only amplified his absence from the head of the table. I saw his ghost in the glint of the silverware he'd polished every year, in the empty space on the coat rack where his worn tweed jacket should have been. Marcus, my son, carved the bird with a practiced efficiency that felt more like a business transaction than a family tradition. The clatter of the electric knife against the platter was the only sound in a room thick with unspoken grief, until he raised his glass, his face a perfect mask of filial concern. "A toast," he began, his voice smooth and steady. "To Mom. For being so strong through all this, even as things get confusing for her." The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. A few moments later, when I went to the mantelpiece to show my granddaughter Chloe the last photo David and I had taken together, our faces crinkled with laughter on a beach in Cape May, it was gone. The silver frame was empty, the space a dusty rectangle of absence. The water glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the hearth with the sound of my own heart breaking. Marcus was by my side in an instant, all gentle hands and soothing noises, but I saw the flicker of something cold and satisfied in his eyes. And in that moment, in the wreckage of glass and memory, a vow took root in the frozen soil of my sorrow. He had mistaken my grief for weakness. He would not make that mistake again. The week following that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner was a descent into a quiet, beige-colored hell. The house, my home of 4 decades, began to feel like a carefully curated stage set, and I was the star performer who couldn't remember her lines. It started with small things. My keys, which I'd kept on a hook by the door since the Carter administration, would turn up in the refrigerator. The remote control to the television, which I watched every evening with a cup of chamomile tea, would be found in the damp soil of a potted geranium. "Oh, Mom," Marcus would say, his voice a suffocating blend of pity and patience. "You've been doing things like this more and more lately." He would document each instance with a soft shake of his head, another piece of evidence for a case I didn't yet know he was building. The centerpiece of his campaign, though, was the photos of David. My husband had been an amateur photographer, and our walls were a testament to a life lived fully and together. There was David, young and impossibly handsome in his army uniform. David, beaming, holding a tiny, squalling Marcus in the hospital. David and me, older, grayer, but with our hands still linked, on a cruise to Alaska. They were my anchors, the visual proof of my history, my love, and they began to disappear. Not all at once, but one by one. The photo from the mantelpiece was just the beginning. A week later, the snapshot of our wedding day, David slipping the ring onto my finger, vanished from our bedroom dresser. When I asked Marcus, my voice trembling with a frantic edge I hated, he put his arm around my shoulder. "It's right here, Mom," he said, opening a random drawer in the guest room. "You must have put it in here for safekeeping and forgotten." His logic was a twisting labyrinth. I knew, with the certainty of a wife who had dusted that photo every week for 45 years, that I had not moved it. But the evidence was there, in his hand, and my own mind was becoming a hostile witness. The most insidious part of his war was fought inside my own body. For the last 10 years, I'd been on a low-dose medication for high blood pressure, a tiny pink pill I took every morning with my orange juice. Shortly after David's death, Marcus had insisted on taking over the management of my prescriptions. "Just one less thing for you to worry about, Mom," he'd said, organizing them into a plastic pill minder with little compartments for each day of the week. About a month after he took over, a strange, persistent fog began to settle over me. Sudden waves of dizziness would send me gripping the nearest countertop. My thoughts, usually as orderly as the card catalog I once managed as the school librarian, became scattered and slippery, like marbles spilled on a polished floor. I felt a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that was entirely foreign to my nature. When I mentioned it to him, he was ready with an explanation. "It's the grief, Mom. It can manifest in physical ways. And honestly, your blood pressure has been a little high. I called Dr. Evans, and he agreed it might be a good idea to try something to help you relax." He'd smiled, patting my hand. "It's just a mild anti-anxiety pill." to help you through the worst of it. It seemed plausible. I was grieving, I was stressed, and I trusted my son. It was the foundational tenet of my existence. A mother trusts her son. So I kept taking the little white pills he laid out for me each morning, unaware that he had flushed my vital blood pressure medication down the toilet and was feeding me a steady diet of a drug designed to induce the very confusion and disorientation he was so carefully documenting. The isolation came next, swift and surgical. My friends from the book club would call, their voices bright with concern. "Sharon, we missed you on Tuesday. Everything all right?" I would tell them I was just having a bad day, that the dizziness was acting up. After a few of these calls, I'd see Marcus's posts on Facebook, a platform I rarely used but that my friends followed with religious fervor. Marcus Miller is feeling heartbroken. October 28 at 3:15 p.m. just had to help mom find her keys again in the microwave this time. It's happening so fast. For all my friends, please be patient with her if she cancels plans or seems out of sorts. Her cognitive decline is hitting us all hard, but we're holding on with love. Family First Dementia Awareness Caring for Mom, the post would be flooded with prayer emojis and messages of support for him. "You're such a good son, Marcus. Your mother is so lucky to have you." My friend Carol, my dearest friend of 30 years, called me after that one. "Sharon, honey," she began, her voice hesitant. "Is there something you're not telling me? Marcus seems to think, well, that you're not doing so well." I tried to explain, to tell her that something felt wrong, that it wasn't my mind, it was something else. But how do you explain a creeping sense of wrongness? How do you describe the feeling that the reality you've known your entire life is being methodically dismantled by your own child? The words came out jumbled, paranoid. I heard myself through her ears, and I sounded exactly like the woman Marcus was describing. The calls from friends became less frequent. The world outside my front door began to shrink, until my universe was composed of 4 walls, a television set, and the ever-watchful, ever-caring eyes of my son. I spent my days lost in memory, retreating to the only place that felt safe. I would sit in David's old armchair, the leather worn smooth and smelling faintly of his aftershave, and let the past wash over me. I remembered bringing Marcus home from the hospital, his tiny body a warm weight against my chest. David and I had been terrified and ecstatic. We poured everything we had into that boy, our time, our money, our dreams. I remembered the parent-teacher conferences where I'd beamed with pride at his good grades, the long hours I'd spent helping him with his science fair projects, the second mortgage we took out on this very house to help him pay for college. Had he forgotten all that, or did he simply see it as an investment he was now ready to cash in? The nights were the worst. I would lie awake, the house groaning around me, and I would feel the tendrils of real fear. It was a cold, quiet dread that had nothing to do with grief. This was something sharper. I fantasized about impossible things. I imagined packing a bag and just leaving, driving until I ran out of road. I imagined smashing every single family photo to pieces, just to rob him of his props. In my darkest moments, alone in the bed I had shared with David for a lifetime, I imagined screaming at him, a raw, guttural scream of rage and betrayal that would shatter his calm demeanor and expose the monster beneath. But these were just fantasies, the fevered dreams of a prisoner. In the daylight, he was still Marcus, my son, and I was just his confused, grieving mother. All I had were my suspicions, a poison I was forced to drink alone. I was losing, and I didn't even know the rules of the game he was playing. The weekend Chloe came to stay was supposed to be a breath of fresh air, a brief respite from the suffocating atmosphere of Marcus's concern. At 16, Chloe was a quiet, watchful girl, with my husband's thoughtful eyes and a fierce intelligence that she usually kept hidden behind a curtain of dark hair and the screen of her laptop. Marcus dropped her off on a Friday afternoon, handing me a bag of groceries and a fresh, neatly organized pill minder. "Now, Mom, just make sure you stick to the schedule," he said, his voice loud enough for Chloe to hear. "And Chloe, honey, keep an eye on your grandma for me, okay? Call me if she has another one of her episodes." He kissed my cheek, a dry, papery gesture that felt more like an inspection than an affection, and left. For the first day, we settled into a comfortable rhythm. We baked David's favorite oatmeal raisin cookies, filling the house with the warm scent of cinnamon and nostalgia. We watched old black and white movies, and for a few hours, I felt like myself again. The fog in my head seemed to thin just a little. The catalyst for my salvation, when it came, was not a dramatic confrontation or a sudden revelation. It was something far more mundane, a teenager's frustration with a slow internet connection. "Grandma, the Wi-Fi is so laggy," Chloe complained from the living room, where she was hunched over her laptop, supposedly doing homework. "I can barely stream a video." "Oh, I don't know, dear," I said from the kitchen. "I don't use it for much more than email." "Can I just try restarting the router?" she asked. "It's in your office, right?" I nodded, and a few minutes later she called out to me. "This is weird." I walked into the small office, a room that had barely been touched since David passed. The router, a black box with a series of blinking green lights, sat on his old desk. Chloe was staring at her laptop screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I logged into the router's admin page to see what was going on," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "The connection log, it shows a constant, active remote connection. From an IP address I don't recognize. It's been running pretty much 24/7 for the last 2 months. Someone has remote access to your entire network, Grandma. They can see every website you visit." A cold dread, sharper and more focused than any I had felt before, washed over me. 2 months. That was when Marcus had started managing my affairs. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Chloe looked up at me, her young face suddenly serious. "It means someone is watching you, digitally." She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Dad is always saying how he needs to monitor things to keep you safe. Do you think—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The pieces began to click into place, not as a jumble of confused memories, but as a clear, horrifying pattern. The misplaced items, the moved photos, the constant, disorienting fog. He wasn't just gaslighting me, he was monitoring me, waiting for the moments of confusion he himself was creating. Chloe's expression hardened. She was no longer just my granddaughter. She was an ally, a technician in a war I hadn't known how to fight. "Grandma," she said, her voice low and urgent, "we need to know what he's doing. The family PC, you almost never use it, right? But Dad does when he comes over to pay your bills online." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I have an idea," she continued. "It's a simple piece of software, a keylogger. It runs invisibly in the background and records every single keystroke. If he's using that computer to manage his project, we'll see it." The word she used, project, sent a shiver down my spine. It was a cold, clinical term for the methodical destruction of his mother's sanity. For the first time in months, the self-doubt that had plagued me evaporated, replaced by a crystalline, righteous anger. "Do it," I said. The next day, Saturday, Marcus stopped by under the pretense of checking in. He smiled at Chloe, praised the cookies we'd made, and then retreated to the office to get Mom's finances in order. Chloe and I sat in the living room, pretending to watch television, the silence between us humming with a terrible share. Knowledge, he was in there for less than an hour. After he left, calling out a cheerful, "Be good, Mom, I'll see you tomorrow," we waited a full 30 minutes before going into the office. Chloe sat down at the desk, pulled up the keylogger's hidden file, and a text document filled the screen. It was a raw, unfiltered record of everything typed in the past hour. And there, in black and white, was the transcript of a web-based chat conversation. Marcus M., "Hey babe, just at Mom's place. Another successful visit. Jessica F., how's the patient holding up? Marcus M., perfectly loopy." She actually believed me when I said she put the wedding photo in the guest room. It's almost too easy. The pills are working like a charm. She's so confused she doesn't know what day it is. Jessica F., so are we getting close? I am so sick of our tiny apartment. I want that big kitchen of hers. Marcus M., soon. I filed the paperwork for a competency hearing last week. Her doctor is on board. I've been feeding him stories for months. I think just one more episode, one more big, public scene, and the doctors will have to give me power of attorney. The house, the inheritance, it will all be under my control. It's what Dad would have wanted, for me to take care of her. Jessica F., you're brilliant. Marcus M., just taking care of family. I stood behind Chloe, reading the words over her shoulder. My breath caught in my chest. It's what Dad would have wanted. The desecration of David's memory was the cruelest cut of all. My grief, my confusion, my fear, it had all been a performance for Marcus, and I had been the unwilling, unknowing star. Chloe reached back and took my hand. Her small, warm fingers wrapped around mine. I was not alone anymore. Chloe, I said, my voice as steady as steel, I need you to print this, and I need a copy of those router logs. I need every single bit of it. The fog had lifted completely. The woman who was afraid and confused was gone. In her place stood a retired schoolteacher who had spent a lifetime gathering facts, documenting progress, and holding people accountable. Class was back in session. My first move was to reclaim my own mind. That Sunday, when Marcus dropped off the new pill minder for the week, I palmed the little white pills and flushed them down the toilet when he wasn't looking. Later, I called Carol. Carol, I said, my voice clear and firm, I need a favor, and I need you to trust me, no questions asked. I need you to go to the pharmacy and pick up my lisinopril prescription. Tell them I lost my bottle. And I need you to hold on to it for me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then, of course, Sharon, I'm on my way. The simple, unquestioning loyalty in her voice was a balm to my wounded soul. Within hours, the correct pink pill was back in my system, a tiny soldier fighting on my behalf. My son had arranged for a preliminary meeting with my physician, Dr. Evans, and a court-appointed social worker for the following Wednesday. This, I knew, was a crucial step before the competency hearing he'd so eagerly planned. It was his chance to present his carefully constructed narrative of my decline to the professionals who held power over my future. He drove me to the appointment, his face a mask of weary devotion. "It's for the best, Mom," he said as we walked into the clinic. "We just need to get you the right kind of help." Dr. Evans, a man I'd known for 20 years, looked at me with an expression of profound pity. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, offered me a weak smile. Marcus began to speak, his voice thick with emotion, recounting fabricated stories of my forgetfulness, my paranoia, my episodes. He painted a picture of a devoted son at the end of his rope. I listened patiently, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I did not interrupt. I did not protest. I let him build his own gallows. When he was finished, a heavy silence filled the sterile examination room. Dr. Evans turned to me. "Sharon," he began gently, "is there anything you'd like to say?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, there is," I said, my voice even and measured. "I know this must be very difficult for Marcus, and I appreciate everyone's concern. But recently, I've been feeling not myself. I've been experiencing severe dizziness, confusion, and anxiety, which is very unlike me." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I've been worried that it might be a bad interaction with the new anxiety medication you and Marcus decided I should take. I understand it was prescribed to help with the grief, but the side effects have been quite debilitating." I turned my full attention to Dr. Evans. "Doctor, to rule out any underlying medical causes for this sudden cognitive shift, I would like you to order a full toxicology screening. I want a complete workup of everything that's in my system. I think it's the responsible thing to do before we start making any life-altering decisions based on my supposed decline." The room went completely still. I saw a flicker of panic in Marcus's eyes, quickly suppressed. He couldn't object without looking like he was hiding something. To object would be to contradict his own narrative of caring for my well-being. Dr. Evans, on the other hand, looked intrigued. A toxicology screen was a concrete, data-driven request. It was the language of medicine, not the fuzzy, subjective language of family drama. It was a perfectly reasonable, proactive step for a patient to request. "That's an excellent idea, Sharon," he said slowly, looking from me to Marcus. "Yes, we should absolutely do that. We can get the blood work done right now." Marcus was trapped. He was forced to smile and nod, to agree that it was a wonderful idea, all while the color drained from his face. It was a small, subtle move, A quiet chess piece slid across the board. It wasn't a checkmate, not yet. But for the first time in this terrible game, it was my move, and I had just put his king in check. The fallout from my request for a toxicology screen was immediate and explosive, just not in the way I expected. Marcus didn't confront me. He didn't rage or demand to know what I was doing. He did something far more desperate. He tried to have me committed. 2 days after my doctor's appointment, 2 large men and a woman in hospital scrubs appeared at my front door. They had a court order for a 72-hour psychiatric hold, based on an emergency petition filed by my son. The petition was a work of fiction, citing my extreme paranoia, delusions of being poisoned, and claiming I was a danger to myself. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. I was forced into an ambulance, my protests ignored, my pleas for them to call my friend Carol dismissed as the ramblings of a disturbed old woman. I was a non-person, a diagnosis on a piece of paper. The 3 days I spent in the psychiatric ward were a blur of condescending nurses, patronizing psychiatrists, and the soul-crushing boredom of a locked facility. But Marcus had made a fatal miscalculation. He had assumed I would break. He didn't realize that in that sterile, controlled environment, I was finally, truly safe from him. I ate their food. I took the correct, blood pressure medication they administered from my official file, not his tainted pillbox. And with every passing hour, my mind grew clearer, sharper, and colder. The psychiatrist assigned to my case, a Dr. Ramirez, was a young, perceptive woman. On the second day, she sat down with me. "Your son is very worried about you, Sharon," she said, her pen poised over a notepad. "My son," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion, "is trying to steal my house." She didn't flinch. "He says you accused him of poisoning you." "I did not accuse him," I stated calmly. "I requested a toxicology screen from my primary care physician to rule out medication interactions. It was a logical medical request." My son's reaction was to have me involuntarily committed. Does that seem like the action of a concerned caregiver or a guilty party trying to obstruct a medical test? I could see a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I had not been ranting or raving. I was coherent, logical, and composed. I was not the hysterical woman described in Marcus's petition. Meanwhile, on the outside, his desperate move was backfiring spectacularly. He posted a long, tearful update to Facebook. "Marcus Miller is absolutely shattered. November 15 at 9:20 a.m., I never thought it would come to this. We had to make the difficult decision to get mom professional, inpatient help this morning. She accused me of trying to poison her, and her paranoia has become a danger to herself. My heart is broken into a million pieces. Please pray for our family during this unimaginable time. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do." Mental health elder care broken heart this time, the reaction was different. Yes, there were the usual sycophants offering prayers and support, but there were other voices now. My friend Carol, furious and protective, immediately began making calls. She left a scathing comment on his post before Marcus could delete it and block her. "What you've done is monstrous, Marcus." I spoke to Sharon 2 days ago and she was perfectly lucid. "This is not about her health, it is about your greed." The post was only up for 10 minutes, but it was long enough. The seeds of doubt had been sown. Neighbors started whispering. The women in my book club started messaging each other. Marcus's act of self-exposure was complete. He had overplayed his hand so dramatically that the community, his audience and jury, began to see the cracks in his performance. On the third day, the results of the toxicology screen I had requested finally came back. Dr. Evans, his voice heavy with apology, called Dr. Ramirez directly. My blood showed 0 traces of the prescribed lisinopril for my heart and dangerously high levels of lorazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety drug for which I had no prescription. It was the irrefutable, scientific proof of my poisoning. I was released that afternoon with a formal apology from the hospital. As I walked out the front doors into the crisp autumn air, a free woman, I did not feel triumphant. I felt a profound, chilling emptiness. My son had not just tried to gaslight me, not just tried to steal my money. He had tried to erase me, to lock me away in a padded room and declare me legally dead. And for that, there could be no forgiveness. There could only be justice. The day of the competency hearing was cold and gray, the sky the color of slate. I sat at the defendant's table next to my court-appointed lawyer, a kind, weary man named Mr. Henderson. He had been skeptical at first. Another professional presented with the compelling narrative of a son burdened by a mother's decline. But after the toxicology report and the hospital's retraction, he had become my staunchest defender. Across the courtroom sat Marcus, dressed in a somber suit, his face a carefully composed mask of sorrow. His girlfriend, Jessica, sat in the first row behind him, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. The hearing began. Marcus's lawyer painted a grim picture, using the very episodes Marcus had engineered as proof of my incompetence. He spoke of my erratic behavior, my confusion, my unfounded accusations. Then, Marcus himself took the stand. He looked directly at the judge, a woman with a stern but not unkind face, and began to weep. The tears streamed down his cheeks as he spoke of his love for me, of the pain it caused him to see me fade away. "I just want what's best for her," he choked out, his voice breaking. "To protect her. When she started accusing me of these terrible things, of trying to hurt her, I knew I had to act. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, Your Honor, but I did it out of love. It was a masterful performance. I could feel the sympathy in the room shifting toward him." He looked like the tragic hero of this family drama, the son making an impossible choice. Mr. Henderson leaned over to me. "Stay calm," he whispered. "It's almost time." As Marcus's lawyer said he had no further questions, Mr. Henderson stood up. "Just a few questions for Mr. Miller, Your Honor." He walked slowly toward the witness stand. "Mr. Miller, you state that you are your mother's primary caregiver, is that correct?" "Yes," Marcus said, wiping a tear. "I've been managing everything for her since my father passed." "Everything?" Mr. Henderson clarified. "Her finances, her prescriptions?" "Yes, she just isn't capable anymore." "I see." Mr. Henderson glanced down at his tablet, where a new email was blinking. An email from an anonymous handle, Grandma's Avenger 16. It had arrived, as planned, at exactly 10:15 a.m. "Your Honor, I have just received new evidence pertinent to this case that I believe the court must see." It was emailed to my office moments ago. The opposing lawyer jumped to his feet, objecting, but the judge, her curiosity piqued, waved him down. "Proceed, Mr. Henderson." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, are you familiar with an individual named Jessica Franklin?" Marcus froze. "She's my girlfriend." "And do you communicate with her regularly via online chat?" The color drained from Marcus's face. "Aye. Sometimes." "Let me read you a transcript of a chat dated Saturday, November 11th, Mr. Henderson said, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom. He began to read. He read Marcus boasting about how loopy I was. He read Jessica's impatience to get into my kitchen. And then he read the final, damning lines into the official court record. "I filed the paperwork for a competency hearing last week. I think just one more episode, one more big, public scene, and the doctors will have to give me power of a T-Torney, the house, the inheritance, it will all be under my control." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jessica Franklin looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Marcus sat there, paralyzed, his carefully constructed mask shattered, revealing the ugly, greedy truth beneath. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Mr. Henderson continued, his voice like rolling thunder, "this evidence packet also contains router logs from Mrs. Miller's home network. It shows a constant, unauthorized remote connection from an IP address traced back to Mr. Miller's apartment, allowing him to monitor her activity 24/7. And finally, it contains the toxicology report from County General Hospital, proving Mrs. Miller was being systematically drugged with unprescribed benzodiazepines while being denied her life-sustaining heart medication." He turned from the witness stand and looked directly at the judge. This was never about a mother's cognitive decline. This was a premeditated, systematic campaign of elder abuse, fraud, and attempted murder by negligence, executed by a son for financial gain. The judge's face was a block of ice. She stared at Marcus, who was now visibly shaking, no longer acting. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Step down." She looked at her bailiff. "See that Mr. Miller and MS Franklin do not leave the courthouse. This hearing is dismissed with extreme prejudice. And I am instructing the district attorney's office, effective immediately, to open a full criminal investigation." The gavel came down with a crack that echoed the breaking of my last tie to the boy I had raised. It was over. The truth, in all its brutal, ugly clarity, had been unmasked in the one place where stories and performances mattered less than cold, hard facts. I looked at my son, my only child, as a bailiff approached him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, not even the ghost of love. Just the vast, chilling silence of a trust that had been burned to ashes. In the weeks that followed, the quiet in my house was different. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of imprisonment, but the clean, peaceful silence of solitude. The legal machine churned on without me. Marcus and Jessica were charged with a litany of crimes, their faces staring blankly from the local news. Their carefully cultivated community standing evaporated overnight. The Facebook posts of support turned to whispers of shock and condemnation. I was no longer the crazy old woman, I was the victim, the survivor. People from church and my old book club dropped off casseroles and offered tearful apologies for ever doubting me. I accepted them with a polite, distant grace. I was grateful, but something inside me had been cordoned off, a part of my heart that was now and forever a private space. The hardest part was not the betrayal itself, but the chilling realization of what my own son was capable of. The child I had nursed through fevers, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose heartbreaks I had mended, had looked at me and seen not a mother but an obstacle, an asset to be liquidated. There is a specific, unique kind of grief for a child who is still alive but is lost to you forever. It is a wound that does not scar over. It remains open, a constant, dull ache. My relationship with Chloe, however, blossomed into something new and beautiful. She was no longer just my granddaughter. She was my co-conspirator, my liberator. She helped me navigate the confusing world of changing passwords and securing my home network. We spent hours together, not talking about what happened, but simply being. We baked, we watched old movies, and for the first time, she told me about her dreams of becoming a cybersecurity analyst. "To catch the bad guys," she said with a small, fierce smile. I saw so much of David's integrity in her, a strength of character that had somehow skipped a generation. One crisp spring morning, Chloe and I were in the backyard, turning over the soil in the small garden that had gone wild with neglect since David died. The sun was warm on my back, and the air smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. As I pressed a tomato seedling into the rich, dark soil, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, one that I thought had been lost forever. The future was not the one I had planned. It would not be filled with boisterous family Thanksgivings and holidays with my son. The trust I once had in the sacred bond of family was broken, but I was not broken. My life was my own again. The house was no longer a prison, but a sanctuary. My mind was my own again, clear and sharp. As I looked at my granddaughter, her hands covered in dirt, her face bright with promise, I knew that my legacy was not in the son I had lost, but in the granddaughter I had found. I was planting new roots in a garden I would tend for myself. Are you or someone you know facing a situation of domestic manipulation or elder abuse? You are not alone, and help is available. Reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline or the National Center on Elder Abuse for confidential support and resources. Your safety and well-being are the first priority.